Hey, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is March 10th, 2022, and we're going to be chatting with Walter Bosley about disclosure today. Let me give a quick shout out here to everybody that's hanging out. Do let me know how the sound is, please. I get so disappointed and sad when it sounds great on my headphones and then the show will end and I'll listen to it on YouTube and something's totally wrong with the sound. That's so disappointing and sad. So let me know if it doesn't sound perfect. Let me give a shout out here to High Plains Drifter, White Rock, 1018 Pilled, Sup and Stuff, Mary Kay, Sapphire Elf is here, Pepper Rock, Dr. Strangelove, AB, I'm Prepared, James Smith is here, AJK says that my Aunt Cisco's podcast is awesome. It's pretty cool. Yeah, go over there and check it out. I think I put her channel on the front of my channel. So if you don't know what it is, you can go check it out that way. Rick278 is here. I see Robbie B, John Frederick, you guys with the super chats before the show even started. Thank you so much. Did I say Wendy Williams? How you doing, Wendy? Hugo Darn is in the house. Let's see who else is here. Scroll up a little bit. And yeah, appreciate the super chats, guys. Really do appreciate it. I'm looking. Travis's Bickle Pickle, Davy Jones Locker, King of Huku Mundu, The Happy Plague, Dr. Vash Wolfwood, Chuck Bam, Not Quite Human. Wow, it seems like everybody's here. Let's see who else we got. Walter Schultz. Hello, Hugo Darn Rick 278. Okay, so we got everybody. Pepper Rock. Everybody's saying great sound. So let me know when Walter starts talking how that goes. Walter was born in San Diego, California, and attended SDSU, where he earned a BA in journalism. He has been employed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, is an inactive reserve officer in the U.S. Air Force, for which he served as a special agent of the AFOSI while on active duty, and then worked as a counter-terrorism operational consultant. Walter, welcome back to Conflict Radio. How are you today?
Pretty good. It's good to be back. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, it should be a pretty interesting show because the topic fascinates me really. But before we get started, can you tell me what AFOSI stands for?
Oh yes, that of course is the legendary or infamous in UFO circles, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. It's essentially an FBI for the Air Force, and by extension, the DoD. Each branch has their own version of it.
All right, awesome. Mm-hmm. So, I wanted to talk to you about UFO disclosure.
Sure.
A lot of people have been freaking out about UFO disclosure. You remember we had the papers that were coming out, I don't know, about a year ago, where it was like a stupid 6-page papers and
the big nothing.
Yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous. Disclosure. All right, first off, if the U.S. government or other governments around the world actually know that there are extraterrestrials visiting us from other planets, that's the purpose of disclosure, right? Is that those governments will actually tell us, right? The common people, the stupid food eaters, right?
Yeah, exactly. Us breeders, us mouth-breathing breeders. Yes, that's what disclosure actually is supposed to mean. We do have this trend, particularly the last couple of years, where you have the I call them the priesthood, the luminaries of ufology of the show, and they like to interpret when a big nothing happens, like you just said, those papers and other things that lately they've been interpreting it as, well, you see, that is disclosure. It's just kind of a in through the back way. It's kind of a no, it's not disclosure. Disclosure has not happened, but people are gaming it.
Do you think disclosure isn't happening because the aliens don't want it to, or that the governments don't want it to, and they're asking the aliens, hey, let's just keep this, secret for now. It could really upset our planet, blah, blah, blah. Do you
I
think it's them or us that wants it hidden?
I primarily lean toward it being them, because think about it. When the European explorers crossed the Atlantic and they arrived in the Americas, did they play games for years and decades and centuries of not showing themselves and only going to, one guy here and one guy there? And no, the ships just arrived, and their attitude was, it just took everything in our power to cross this ocean in this tiny little wooden boat. We're here, deal with us. And I see it would be a similar, in a much more modern context, but it'd be a similar situation. Do you think a civilization that has crossed the vastness of space is going to play the games that these beings associated with legitimately mysterious UFO tales, accounts and cases? Do you think that they would cross all those miles of space to do that? I don't. I think the ones that are truly going to travel here, I think they'll just show up in our skies and say, "Hey, we're here," and it'll be kind of a deal with it situation. Now, what does that mean for these other UFO cases that are legitimately strange and not explained by secret human technology or misunderstanding? How do we explain these UFO cases where there are games, there is weirdness to it? Well, that would suggest to me that perhaps if the people, the entities, the intelligence doing these kinds of things, playing the games and being coy and shy, are doing this, that suggests to me that maybe they're not coming that far. You know what I'm saying? That perhaps they're a little closer to us than the vastness of space. So wherever it is they are, be it in a a subterranean or a subsurface space on Mars, or inside the moon, or in the bottom of our ocean, wherever they're hiding out, being closer, they could afford to maybe play these weird games with us. But if it's not extraterrestrials playing the games with us, who is it? My point is, there's something going on with UFOs that the extraterrestrial hypothesis just does not explain, despite everybody trying to fit that square peg into every round UFO hole. And I think that that has everything to do with why we have or have not seen disclosure. Whoever it is that is messing with us does not want to openly disclose themselves. And I question whether it's, ETs who've come across the vastness of space.
All right. I mean, it could also be that they've come through some kind of dimensional portal or something as well.
Yeah, which would be, in my context here that I'm laying out, it'd be the same thing. In other words, for them, it's maybe a 20-minute trip, right, to gen up the portal device, go through that portal, and they're here, right? And then they can mess with us and then jump in the portal and they're back home. We're talking an intelligence with technology sufficient enough that something like that would be reasonable. To me, what's not reasonable is if they are traveling, doing it the old-fashioned way and traveling across the vastness of space. Why would they make all that effort and then hide from us? It would be their own reasons if they still would, and that's my point. The extraterrestrials, if they want to be known, like some experiencers and witnesses and alleged abductees are claiming, the aliens, they're on our side, they want us to know them, blah blah blah. Well, if that were the case, they would disclose themselves, from my perspective.
If they do fly across the space, do you think it's more of a one-way trip for them?
Ooh, could be.
Like they get here and then that's it. They've used all their fuel and whatnot. So they have created these bases, and they just get here and replenish, natural ramen stuff that they have on their home planet to the people the ones that live here and live underground, say, or in an underground or an underwater base or something?
Yeah, and any, any of those situations, you would have multiple, possibilities within each context for why these beings, which by the way could be just as human as you and I. I mean, I don't buy the, alleged conventional wisdom of science that says human beings just like us couldn't possibly, originate or be on any other world. That is patently ridiculous, because until our scientists visit every habitable world in the entire universe or multiverses and find absolutely no human beings like us anywhere else, they can't say that until that's done. And
I mean, I don't think that that's possible. I would imagine that. I mean, space is so big.
yeah,
There's going to be thousands of planets like Earth out there.
yeah, but it's the conventional wisdom, and I think that's a mistake. I think that's typical, just not wanting to think about the real question. And now, human beings from other worlds, the fact that they could blend in with us with relative ease, they might do something where it's like, let's hang back where they can't really pick us up. We'll scoot in, we'll slide in there to Earth, and we'll kind of, walk around like we're one of them, just to kind of do a recon. Now, why would they do that? Here's where you got to be concerned. The civilization that is being secretive about its presence, you have to wonder, what's their objective? Could they be scoping us out for something that's not good for us? Could it be that they're doing some type of military recon to assess the situation here? Now, I know this isn't popular because you have so many people that think that there's absolutely no possibility of any threat from outer space, and they all fall back on the great popular story of the Werner von Braun alleged deathbed confession, which is not what the source says it was. It was a conversation, not a deathbed confession. But we have one source for this story, and everybody points to it. They say, well, Werner von Braun said that that when we're told that there's going to be an alien attack, that it's all a lie. Well, that's not exactly entirely what he said. And if you look at it, if he said it, it could be just as easily interpreted as using an alien threat to then start some type of new world order and control over people. That could be the lie, not that there's no such thing as an alien threat. But it's very popular for people to fall back on. Werner von Braun said it would be a lie. Well, the problem with that is, like I said, is that really what he said? Number two, we got to ask ourselves, did he say that? We only have this story from one source, as I said, Dr. Carol Rosin, who I've met her once. She's very reasonable, nice, intelligent person. I have no animus, but, on a lot of other things, if we only had one source and it was just testimony, people would be questioning it. But nobody wants to question in UFO world. Nobody really wants to question this Werner von Braun, the alien threat's a lie thing. Why? Because it's confirmation bias for all the people that are the real ET enthusiasts. Because in their view, the ETs are just wonderful space angels who have nothing but, our best interests in mind. And again, another absurdity that is based on what? When you go back into ancient history and you look at the accounts of beings who come from the sky and are mistaken for gods, the kinds of things that are the source of the ancient aliens theory and all the stuff we have today. But when you go back and look in mythologies and religions and you talk about these accounts, let's say it's true, this happened, all too often the beings that come from the sky come down and smite the hell out of everybody until we bend the knee and worship them, right? And they set themselves up as gods, and they're not always nice and benevolent and wonderful. And even the good ones, so to speak, if you don't exactly follow their recipe of commands, look at what they do. They're a jealous god and all that stuff. So we have, if you want to look at it that way, we actually have, historically, these encounters haven't always been so loving and jello and pudding. We've had invaders come here within the context of the ancient myths, conquerors and such. How do we know that isn't being cooked up by another civilization? So that you have to seriously consider that a civilization able to get here that's being coy and being really secretive, well, that could be. I'm not saying for sure. I'm not one of those guys that claims to have some BS insider source, and I'm just telling you from my perspective, you have to consider that this shyness, on the part of the, these ETs that allegedly mean us nothing but love and, and goodness. You got to wonder, is that the truth? Could one or more of them be from a civilization that has conquest on its mind? As unpopular as that idea is.
All right, let's look at this. Wendy Williams made a comment, and I normally don't do this, but it's a comment, not a question. She says, I love Dr. Jacobs, Bud, and Mac. Plus, I seriously don't think they are here to benefit us. Right. Whatever they're doing, it's all for them. And I agree with that statement. I think everything they're doing is all for them. So that's where the idea of UFO disclosure isn't going to happen until we're at the precipice of our own destruction by ourselves, because then they're forced to stop us from destroying the planet that they might themselves even be stuck on.
But are they? Because if they've been here for a while, why didn't they stop the United States from dropping the atomic bombs in World War II? They didn't stop us then. And so would they really do that? Did they stop us in the ancient war that's talked about in the Ramayana? No, they participated in it, really, if you look at the description. So we can't say. I don't know if I subscribe to that idea that they're going to save us from ourselves.
Well, that's disappointing. So we'll never get disclosure.
Oh no, we'll get disclosure when one of these days a civilization just decides to show up and they don't really care about our local diplomacy. They just say, "Hey, we're here to open up relations now between our world and yours. Let's get to it." And that the civilization that doesn't really care what goes on between our leaders and the little political games here. And I think that eventually will happen. I personally think that there's a nugget of truth to mythologies and in some stuff, scripture stuff. And so I think there's a nugget of truth to these ancient stories. I think we were very openly visited in ancient times. And, they sure as heck came down and did what they darn well pleased, with whatever display they needed to put on. And I would say a friendly civilization would just show up and say, "Hey, here we are. We're friendly. We want to open relations, between our world and yours." But we're at a disadvantage, we the public, right?
Yeah, that's the truth. Always, we're the ones that, pay the taxes and go fight the wars, right? It's always on our shoulders. Yeah. Let me ask you this: what happens if ET contact and a planet that's able to have intelligent life is so far away that they actually can't make the trip, and what we're dealing with on this planet isn't extraterrestrial at all? It's a breakaway civilization, and they're living, say, inside the Earth or in the oceans or whatever, right? Maybe they're just simply in another dimension that still needs this Earth, right? Wouldn't
Sure.
wouldn't they then be the ones to stop us from destroying their world as well?
Well, more so than I would think, more so than just some willy-nilly ET civilization out there. Yeah, of course, because even if they are a breakaway group, they're of us, right? Meaning Earth-based humankind. I guess conceivably there could have been a breakaway group from, let's say, Mars when the destruction hit that planet, and they've been here for ages since then. That could be where these folks we're talking about came from, and maybe they've helped along human-based, uh, Earth-based humans. I'm sorry, to the point where a particular breakaway has had help from people who originated off world. As you can tell, there's multiple possibilities with that, and that's a fascinating possibility that to me is just as interesting as the ET discussion. Um,
Do you think
they're closer.
more likely?
Pardon?
Do you think that that's more likely that it's a breakaway civilization?
I think let's say well, here's the thing. Where it's more likely is because they're somewhere close by, right? So it's easier access and all that. That's where it's most likely, but otherwise it's just as likely. We have to say it's just as likely as any ET civilization coming here. Now, remember, I've fine-tuned.
I would say that it's more likely. I don't mean to interrupt, but I think that a breakaway civilization is probably more likely than actually ETs. Wouldn't you say?
Well, now, are you saying to explain UFOs?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because my number is this. I think 90%. Now, remember, we have to separate legitimate UFO reports as opposed to people just BSing to get attention. Okay. But a legitimate UFO report where they're not, looking at an obvious satellite or a 747 flying over whatever, 707 or whatever, a legitimate, what the heck is that? I think that 90% of legitimate UFO reports can be explained by human technology, be it classified by a government, a military, or it's secret technology owned and being developed and used by a breakaway group. And I think that explains 90% of legitimate UFO cases. Now, that leaves 10% that ETs fall into. ETs don't, in my opinion, ETs don't explain the remaining 10%, but they don't have to, because think about it. MUFON, for example, a few years ago reported that in a given month in 2019, there were 5,000 UFO reports around the world. Okay. Now let's say that only 10% of those were legitimate. Well, that's 500 UFO reports. And then let's say 10% of that were extraterrestrial. Well, that's 50. Let's say if that were legitimate, that's 50 would be legitimate extraterrestrial craft in a given month. So you see, when I say 90% to 10% and then just down to 1% or whatever, that's still, you only need one ET to prove it, right? And I'm still allowing for just dozens of possible ET craft in any given year. But yes, to go back to what you're saying, yes, I think breakaways do account for the technology that's not secret technology of our militaries around the world and not ET. Yes.
All right. Well, let me ask you this then. Do you have any idea if it is a breakaway civilization, who it would be?
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody really knows, but as far as
Well,
having
no,
an
I know
idea,
you don't. Oh,
The research, that I've done points to a, a, a German group and what I think would have been an American group. Now, the German group we learn about first from Charles Delschow and the Sonora Aero Club information and all of that. Um, I think an American group emerged sometime right after the Civil War, and this explains, in my opinion, the 1890s airship mystery in the United States. I think what that was the result of 30 years, 25 to 30 years of development that was being done with these airships. And that would be, in my opinion, that would have been an American group. So you would have had this German group and the American group. Now, the research I've done on the German group, you'll find interesting, is that I've shown the threads that would likely have been involved in this German group in the 19th century that Delschow talks about, and how these threads would have led to the formation of Nazi Germany. And so, in my research, I've set up that context with the stuff I've found. Now, as far as the American group, they seem, in my opinion, and based on the reports, they seem to have disappeared on us in the early years of the 20th century. Now, there could be a group that's been around for centuries, associated with the Society Angelique, the Angelic Society, that there's evidence this group was kind of a secret source for Jules Verne and the things he wrote. So that tells you how long they've been around. And there have been these other interesting secret societies that, in some cases, could be the groups that led to what we would call a breakaway group. So these are all the possibilities I've looked at, and in my opinion, that's who we're looking at.
so you think it's possible that it's that recent of a breakaway? I was thinking more like maybe the Atlanteans or something, but you think it's as recent as the 40s?
Oh, yeah. Well, I date it back to the 1850s, according to what Delschow said, with the German one, and the 1860s with the American one. Yeah. Now, what we've seen since the 40s, in my opinion, is the continuation of the German one, with the help, I hate to say it, I'm not the first one to say it, but with the help of the United States and our post-war military-industrial complex, because the kind of guys that we got from Nazi Germany were the guys who definitely would have been involved with or used by, for their expertise, the German breakaway, whatever they're calling themselves. And this has led to, I think it led directly after World War II to classified human space operations being conducted by, back then, the U.S. Air Force, probably with the U.S. Navy, starting in the 50s, with NASA just being the public organization. But this would have been greatly a product of our military-industrial structure since post-World War II. So that's what I see happening as recently as World War II. But I think the true breakaway groups have their origins, even the German one, before that, a century or centuries, and they could. The thread could date all the way back to the Atlantis, whatever Atlantis actually was, because the Angelic Society and other secret societies like that, the implications there within the context when you're talking about them and looking at them is that this is a line of knowledge that has been passed down for ages. So it certainly could date to that civilization prior to the cataclysm that many believe and see evidence of destroying whatever Atlantis was, or even the Rama Empire. They could have been fighting each other, for all we know. But yeah, Yeah, it could very much, the string, if you follow it and you pull the threads, could very much lead back to the Atlantean era. Sure.
All right. So let me ask you this. You were talking about airships. So let's talk about airships a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's possible that airships could be, say, the grandfather of today's UFO?
Sure. I do a chart that I call it the Walter Bosley chart, funny enough, but and it's just an easy, simple chart to show you what I mean. I put it in. It's been in a couple of my books, but basically, um, it shows you that what Charles Delshow was describing, that this mysterious Sonora Aero Club was building and flying in the 1850s in California, what they were doing specifically. Is just like what was described 40 years later in the 1890s airship mystery, and then um, 30 or 40 years later with the legendary alleged Die Glocke, the Nazi bell. Okay, and I lay out and show the evidence that what was being done in the 1850s was a rudimentary proof of concept, primitive version of the bell. All the Nazis did was, by the time we got to the 20th century and electricity and electric power technology had been advanced, the Nazis just really they juiced it up with stronger physical materials for the structure of the thing, and they just juiced it up with tons of electricity, which the guys in the 1850s they didn't have. And then I think that basic idea of what the Sonora Aero Club was doing in California in the 1850s is what led to those same ideas, are what led to what I suspect, and I've laid this out in my books, what I suspect was a U.S. government black project. It would have been the first black project in our history, right after the Civil War, and 25, 30 years of development of what they were doing in the 1850s with this rudimentary bell is what we saw in the 1890s airships. Now, they were larger, they were more mechanically and technologically sophisticated, yet they were still of the technology of their day, but they were just sophisticated, and they were more sophisticated than what was in the 1850s. And I have this chart where I show the 1850s flying device, and then the 1890s airship, and then I show a picture of, a modern flying saucer, okay, circa what people thought of them by the 1980s. And then underneath the rudimentary 1850s, I show a Ford Model T, and then underneath the 1890s airship, I show a 58 Buick, and underneath the modern flying saucer, I show an 85 Porsche. So you see the development of the automobile from the Model T to the 58 Buick to the, a 1980s Porsche is allegorical. It's analogous. I'm sorry. It's analogous to going from the 1850s little flying contraption called an Arrow to the 1890s airship to the 20th century flying saucer. And the thread is whatever that darn bell technology turns out to actually be, because it's all there. So yes, I do, in that sense, I do see the airships as the father of whatever was done with the Nazi bell technology as far as propulsion and things like that. But the grandfather is actually the 1850s Arrow, according to Delshow. That's my perspective on this.
All right. Wendy Williams wants to know what book that information is in.
It is in, some of it's in my book, Empire of the Wheel 2, Friends from Sonora. More of it is in my book, Origin, the 19th century the 19th century emergence of the 20th century breakaway civilizations. That's a mouthful. Just remember, origin is the main word in the title. And I also go into it even a little more, or the bits and pieces that are left over in my book, Shimmering Light, which gets into Operation Paperclip and its effects directly on the pursuit of U.S. space travel. You see, what people don't realize is that the bomb was not driving Operation Paperclip. A lot of people just assume that, us wanting to do the atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project, is what started and inspired Operation Paperclip. No, what inspired and motivated Operation Paperclip was our aerospace medicine experts in the U.S. Army Air Corps had been friends with the German aerospace medicine experts, because these are the guys, when you want to put people in space, what do you got to do? You got to keep them alive, right? This falls under the purview of what we call aerospace medicine. And since the 1920s, aerospace medicine personnel and scientists were working on putting man in space. The Germans, the Americans, and these guys all knew each other before the war broke out. So the war breaks out, and these guys like Colonel Harry Armstrong and then Colonel Otis Benson, these are our aerospace medicine guys among them. And what they do is they conceive this program to get these German aerospace medicine guys from the Luftwaffe, because as the war's ending, these are the guys looking at, we need to be in space. This is in the mid to late 40s. We need to be in space. That was always their pursuit. And when Otis Benson got into the transferred, when they stood up the Air Force from the Army Air Corps in 1948, Otis Benson eventually in the 50s became the commander of the Aerospace Medicine Division of the U.S. Air Force. And he was always pursuing putting Air Force personnel in space. That's what he was all about. That's what his predecessor, Harry Armstrong, was all about. And so the U.S. Air Force was developing that through the 50s. The Mercury program, if you've ever watched the movie or the Disney series, The Right Stuff, where it's all about the Mercury astronauts, that was actually a program that was designed and being pursued and developed by the United States Air Force. And the public version of it was shifted over to NASA, which didn't stand up until October of 58. And they did the public version of it. But the public was told, well, NASA's our new space agency, and they're going to be the ones doing all the putting Americans in space stuff. But nowhere did the Air Force really say that they ever quit putting people in space. And who helped us get there, were these German Luftwaffe, Nazi Germany, aerospace medicine guys. And we kind of made a deal with the devil to get that reward, so to speak, because with it came an age-old way of the way Germans would do business, specifically the Prussian culture within Germany. They were the ones driving German unification in the 19th century, and they had since medieval times been using this method of infiltration of another country by getting involved in their industry, becoming indispensable to their industry, then indispensable to their defense industry. And then the next thing you know, they got their claws into that country's economy and war machine, and then they get their claws into their political machine. They'd been doing this since the medieval times, and it had always worked. And this is something that Helmer shocked up in the World War II era. When we get up to the World War II era, he encouraged Germany to do that. And that's how Germany, after World War I, rebuilt their war machine. They ingratiated themselves with other countries so that they could have this war machine built outside of Germany, so that they could fool the world and say, oh, no, we're not building arms and munitions. Well, they were, I'm putting air quotes up, helping other countries build theirs, when actually, they were doing this to benefit themselves. And I argue that they did this to the United States. When they realized whoever is the core of this Nazi thing, organization, Joseph Farrell calls it the Nazi International, whatever, they saw that they reached a point where, Germany, we've used Germany, our home country, we're gonna lose this war, but we're gonna keep our thing alive. How are we going to do it? Let's do it the old-fashioned way, the way we've done it for centuries. Let's ingratiate ourselves with the United States. and some of them did the same thing with Russia, with the Soviet Union. But let's ingratiate ourselves with the United States, and we'll just do that thing where we get our claws into the U.S. and then it's kind of like an undercover invasion, so to speak.
So the Nazi bell is actually really fascinating because it's massive, isn't it? It's huge.
Well,
I mean,
I don't know if it's, you mean the literal size of it or its impact?
The size of it, like it's what, like 20 feet wide, probably, kind of in a circle.
I think it depends on the one that Igor Wachowski was told about. I think it's about like 12. It's actually like, was it 12 feet wide and 15 high or something like that.
Are there any of them anywhere around? Does anybody have any of them?
Oh, well, that would be great if they did. The suspicion is that we got our hands on one, or the one, if they only had one, that we got our hands on it at the end of the war. And you could look at, there's a couple of ways of looking at the Kecksburg UFO. Okay. That's not ET. Number one is that there were space capsules being tested that were pretty darn close to what Kecksburg was described as looking like. Okay, so it could be that mundane. Sorry folks, Kecksburg wasn't from another world, or it could be a contraption we came up with in our development of the Bell technology we got our hands on. That's another possible explanation for Kecksburg.
A lot of people think that it was the Nazi bell that actually crashed in Roswell.
I would say that's even more possible than ET being the explanation for Roswell. Yeah, that's another unpopular position I hold. Is I have, for a while now, I've been convinced that ET had nothing to do with Roswell, but certainly it could have been some type of German technology. For an excellent analysis and book on that, read Joseph Farrell's Roswell and the Reich. He does the best presentation and analysis on the possibility of it being German technology. Personally, and I lay this out in my book Shimmering Light, I suspect that Roswell might have been our first attempt at manned space flight. And I lay out why it would have been tightly classified. It was a Cold War, right? And why it continued to be classified and such. I lay that all out in the book, but Roswell certainly could have been, us messing around with trying to figure out this, or are Germans trying to reconstruct, what some of them did, if some of them indeed worked on the bell. It's interesting. The problem with the bell story is that, and I did a video of this on my YouTube channel, the Walter Bosley channel at YouTube. I did it last summer. The problem with the bell is the story that Igor Wachowski was told. He was told by, I believe it was a Polish intelligence officer, and the things in it, down to the description of the bell, a very close description, are to be found in previously existing literature, specifically the Dean Koontz novel Lightning. It lays horizontal instead of standing up, but the time machine that Dean Koontz talks about and depicts in his novel is essentially what we know as the bell when you read the description of it. So you have to ask yourself, where did Koontz get this idea? Did he have a source? Or did he make it up? It's interesting. Now, I lean towards he didn't make it up because Delschow did his drawing of the Bell technology. He did his drawing sometime between 1893 and 1923 because he died in 1923. So here's this, and his stuff was unknown to the public until 1971 or 2. Pete Navarro discovered him in a junk shop, Delshell's books, in 1971, and shortly after that, some of the stuff started showing up in museums, local museums in Texas and such. But anyway, if Delschau's stuff was truly unknown, then the Nazis developing the bell had to have got it from somewhere, possibly ancient texts. But I argue that this German group that Delschau talks about, I think they were the ones that started developing it in that rudimentary sense, and I think that thread leads right to Nazi Germany. So I don't think Dean Koontz made it up, is my point.
Do you think it's possible that the Germans during World War II found something down in Antarctica? Could it be that they found a civilization living there?
Well, could it be? Yes. Now, keep in mind, this idea of an elaborate Nazi flying saucer base in Antarctica is utterly ridiculous. However, a submarine, a submarine outpost, absolutely. We know for a fact that they explored, what they called New Schwabenland, right? I mean, they were all over Antarctica. And certainly, I agree that they could have had some type of, outpost for sub-squadrons. And so therefore, absolutely, they could have discovered, say, the ruins of a civilization, or if there's a group still down there or happen to have been down there at that time and would still be there today, certainly they could have. Now, whether they did, that has been a pretty well-kept secret, except for the little glimpses we get. There's the Admiral Byrd story, which there are problems with that, but the nugget of that, even the problem material, could be supporting what you suggested. Could it be a group of people that even the Nazis encountered down there? Then there's the recent visitations, right? A few years back of various famous people and luminaries and such. And, Buzz Aldrin made his weird comment about something of great evil down there and such. So I definitely think something significant, either historically significant or significant as to our role in the universe or whatever, something has been found in Antarctica. Yeah.
You got to wonder if maybe they found you have to entertain, and actually I've been thinking of doing a show on this, and everybody, I'm about ready to totally have everybody up in arms on the channel. I'm thinking of doing a flat earth show, because the theory is fascinating, that there's this ice wall, and if you get over the ice wall, you go into the other part of the earth where like these other continents are. You know what I mean? Like with these civilizations that nobody's known or thought about. To me, that idea is just fascinating. That would be so cool if that was the case. And to think that the Nazis somehow, maybe they found a tunnel through the wall, or they went under the wall in a sub, or they flew over the wall or something and found this other earth, this other, these new continents and this whole other thing. It's fascinating. What do you think of that? I know it sounds ridiculous. I know, I'm telling everybody right now, it sounds ridiculous, but it's a fascinating theory. It really is.
It's a fun theory. I'm more inclined to be open to habitable subterranean areas underneath the surface than I am flat Earth. I think the whole flat Earth thing. Sometimes I wonder if this flat Earth theory of our times wasn't some type of goof that a group of skeptics foisted upon the community just to see how many people would go for it. Because it has been disproven so many times, and the only people who deny it they're just denying it. I mean, they even if you've ever seen that documentary from a couple of years ago, they even disproved their own theory in the documentary about them. It's kind of sad. It breaks your heart a little bit because you can see the look on the guy's face is like, oh, I feel stupid, But
It's
I get what you're saying. I get
it's
what you're saying, but
talk about.
what's that?
It's so fun to talk about. Like
Oh,
the
sure,
possibilities
sure.
could be endless. So like what's on the other side of that wall? Like if there's actually a wall there,
Well,
that'd be the coolest thing. I would love to like be able to go on the other side of the wall and just explore.
but wouldn't it be just as fascinating if it turns out not the hollow earth like it's a hollow ball, but what if there are these habitable zones underneath the surface and that's what it is that they found?
Yeah,
I'm more inclined to think that. To me, that's just as
I
fascinating and thrilling because that's a hidden land.
if there was still a civilization down there and they were perhaps trapped and
Or what if they chose to be down there? My dad, I talk about this in my book, Shimmering Light. I'm not trying to push books, but people ask, where do you talk about this? But, my dad's weird experience, basically in his testimony, he was told that the ones who live down there, they chose to stay down there, that they want really not much of anything to do with us. At least this is what he was told back in the 50s. Now, I do analyze the whole weird story of my dad, and I also present the possibilities as to why the story could not be true, and it has to do with MK Ultra and the U.S. Air Force and false narratives laid into the subconscious of human beings, and that whole thing being developed by the CIA was a very real thing. But if you take it at face value, think about it. They wouldn't necessarily need to be trapped. Why would they be trapped, particularly if they have, a technology?
well,
They
there
got
could be
to
a whole
come and go.
civilization on Mars that's trapped underground there.
There's what?
There could be a whole civilization on Mars that's trapped underground.
Could be. When you say trapped, you mean like just
I mean,
not able to?
Mars used to be a planet filled with oceans and had
Yeah,
atmosphere and
yeah,
had beings. They could have known that their world was facing trouble and went underground, and
yeah.
they've been down there for thousands and thousands of years.
Understood. Okay. Yeah. 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 I get what you're saying. Yeah. And they can't come to the surface, right? Because they wouldn't, it's not habitable up top. Sure. I see your point. Yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting because you would think then that maybe they'd want the help of a civilization of surface dwellers who have the means to go get them and liberate them from their geophysical bonds, so to speak. Um, that could be interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking at a Robbie B's comment here. BitChute has a lot of YouTube people. I think BitChute does, but Rumble has more. Everybody
Mm.
should. You're looking for somebody who's been, I guess, removed from this platform. Go check out Rumble. They're probably there. All right, so what a fascinating conversation it really is, and I love being able to think about things like this and learn things like this. What would you think? I mean, we've all seen the movie Iron Sky, right? With
Mhm.
it's on the moon. Did you see
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, it's a fun goof. It really is.
It's a great movie, actually. It really is
Yeah.
fantastic. I was so shocked at how good it was. If you haven't seen it, you have to see this movie. It's called Iron Sky. There's even a sequel. I don't think the sequel is not as good, but
It
I
is
did.
the sequel is streaming right now, but I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah,
So,
you should watch it. I mean, it's okay. It's just not as good as the first one. But
yeah.
what do you think of that possibility? Could there be something on the dark side of the moon that and not only that, but do you think we actually made it there?
Oh, well, I have no problem with, now when I say that the US Air Force, for example, and with the US Navy likely, we're doing classified human, space travel. I've started using that instead of saying SSP or Secret Space Program because all the, morons and liars, really ruined that, that discussion. Um, uh I think the space technology for a while was fairly parallel to what we saw NASA developing. Not entirely, but fairly parallel. I think maybe they took space planes in a farther direction than we were told. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is that since the 50s, if I'm right, that means we had the possibility of putting people up on the moon before Apollo 11. Now, it's my personal opinion that the secret to Apollo 11, this is my personal hypothesis, this is opinion, but it's my opinion that the secret to Apollo 11 was not that we didn't go. I think the discussion that we faked the moon landings, in my opinion, is as dumb as the flat Earth thing. But here's what I do think. I think in the middle of a Cold War, we're not going to put on a dog and pony show in front of the world if we're not sure we can do it, because we run the risk of tragically killing, 3 human beings or 2 that would go down to the moon in front of the world, and that would make us look stupid. So I argue that we probably tried it first to make sure it could work, so that the risk factor, we were a little bit closer to a comfort zone. Don't get me wrong. Every launch, every journey is dangerous in its own right. We know this, particularly in the shuttle era, but you get my point. The point is, rather than show the world the first time, let's do it secretly, and then we'll put on the dog and pony show. This would explain why the astronauts were kind of reticent to talk about certain things. This would explain why Neil Armstrong was almost kind of a hermit. I mean, you're allegedly the first human being to walk on the moon, and you're just going to be all shucks and shy? Baloney. You're gonna every year you're gonna go to the parade, or you're gonna go on TV and do your aw shucks thing. I'm humble, but my gosh, you're the alleged. I think what it was is he and the others knew darn well that they weren't really the first ones. So all that to say, we also had Project Horizon and these other U.S. Air Force and U.S. Army plans and programs that we have the documentation for, of a moon base and stuff like that. What am I saying? You put all that together, could we certainly have, had personnel on the moon that we weren't aware of and have gone to the dark side and, landed and looked at stuff closely? Yeah, we could have. And it's fun. It's very fun and interesting to think about. Now, the story will be told as other countries whose space programs we don't control start going to the moon, and they have, China, India, and stuff, and China's put a lander down. And if they put landers down on the dark side and we see what's there, and we're not seeing any bases, either if there was a base, it's gone now, or it's underground, we'll see. We'll be able to put these ideas to the test. But could we, when we ask the question, could we have? I think the answer is yes. In the context of Iron Sky, which is really fun, to think about. It's fun to watch. It's a fun movie to watch. But the whole Nazi Hanabu, Nazi flying saucer thing, that is post-war propaganda BS. And so it wouldn't be that.
I think he got out, though. I think he made it to. I think he got out to Argentina. I believe that.
Oh, Hitler? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think he totally got out of there.
I think that one. Did you see the series? Was it Finding Hitler, or it was the one where they had the FBI document?
Hunting Nazis, was it?
Hunting, yeah. I found that really compelling, and I think I used to work for them, so I know how they think, I know how they do things. I think the Bureau was sufficiently convinced of that possibility that when you watch that Hunting Hitler show, whatever it was called, that's really what I saw in between the lines, if not flat out expressed by some of the guys, on that. Is that
they were never going to admit that they were doofed.
Well, think about it. World War II comes to an end. I mean, for a variety of reasons, we know for a fact that certain high-ranking Nazis escaped justice. We know that they went to South America because they were caught in South America, afterwards, right, by the Mossad and others. So we know that part's a fact. We also know, as I said, that Operation Paperclip is a real thing. So what if there's this, seriously, this Nazi group, post-war Nazi group, that after the dust settled, they restructured, and operated from South America. Um, and so here we have the people of the world. Oh, World War II's over. Oh, we defeated the Nazi war machine. Well, you've heard it said. I've said it for years. We defeated Germany. Are we sure we defeated the Nazis? Right? So think how embarrassing that would be to say, actually, we didn't defeat the Nazis. We just defeated Germany. No, no, no. You want your people to think that conflict is over, and especially if you've made a deal with these surviving Nazis, a la our military-industrial complex, or maybe they negotiated an agreement to be essentially left alone. They would operate under the surface as long as the Allied governments who they negotiated with post-war agreed to leave them alone. They would not overtly do this or that. And then if I'm right about my hypothesis that we actually were secretly invaded by surviving Nazi forces, influences, through Operation Paperclip, then essentially our leaders would be told that we would leave them alone because of, I'm putting air quotes on what we're getting out of their scientists and such.
If that's the case, and they got help from people that were voted in our government, and it was treason.
Well, George H.W. Bush's father, and his grandfather got into trouble for doing business, banking with Nazi Germany after hostilities had started. And they were through Bunny Harriman and the son of E.H. Harriman, the railroad magnate. And we know that Standard Oil, if I'm not mistaken, were actually indicted for selling oil and gas, oil and fuel to Nazi Germany during the war. And their attitude to the congressman that called them out on it, they said, hey, we're charging them more than we charge our own government, so stop complaining. That was their attitude.
Do you think it's possible that they're the actual deep state now?
Yeah. I think that they've got their hands in what we call the deep state. Yeah, because what we call the deep state, these are the people that are the career folks. Doesn't matter who the president is. The administrations come and go, but these, as we know, by definition, what the deep staters are. And these are the people whom, any kind of hidden post-war, Nazi culture, these are the people that they would want some type of control or influence over. So, yeah, that's where you're going to find, what Joseph Farrell calls, the Nazi International in our country. Absolutely. And at the same time, you've got the darned Soviet, the former Soviet Union, and their infiltrators into our country. See, here's the thing. Joseph McCarthy, Senator McCarthy, was he a brash guy at times? Yeah. Did he make some, public stumbles and what is it? Yep. But guess what? History has shown that he wasn't wrong. And we're beginning to see, egg on the faces of those who, completely demonized him. And so we've been contending with both of those influences having their hooks under the surface in our deep state, both post-war fascists, okay, and the former Soviet Marxist world, globalist. They eventually became the globalists, and so that's what we're contending with, and it's put us in a world of hurt, and it explains some of the crappier things our government has done since World War II. If you look at it from the filter of those two influences after World War II, it makes sense. I mean, the way John F. Kennedy was assassinated, that's right out of the playbook of medieval Prussian Junkers who were had their little secret faction that was bent on overtaking whatever little Germanic state that they would infiltrate. They had a group that would do public assassinations to make their points and to emphasize their power, and everybody, you better stay in line. And the JFK assassination fits that model perfectly.
All right. Well, anyway, I guess getting back onto our original topic, hopefully it's not, the beginning or end of World War III when we finally get disclosure, because they come in and put an end to us before we do.
Or just dominate us,
Yeah, it's kind of like, hey, you guys had your chance. Now you blew it. Now we're taking over, and now you're doing what we say, right?
Or gee, remember us? We're the ones that you called the this, that, or the other. We're the ones that you called the Yahweh or the Anunnaki or whatever. Well, we're back, and you're gonna put us on a pedestal and kiss our butts again, or it's gonna be trouble. And there we are all over again, dealing with things that ends up being mythology centuries from now, right?
Yeah, it's the truth. That's for sure. All right, everybody. So now's your time for questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box below, and Walter and I will get to answering them for you. Just, I guess, try to stay on subject, I suppose, and ask away. Now's your chance. So, just want to give a reminder to thumb up the video if you haven't yet. It does help the algorithm and help the channel, and it helps support the show. If you listen to the show and then you enjoy the show, give it a thumbs up. It helps us out, and we do appreciate it. Super chats and super stickers are always welcome, and definitely has been getting Conflict Radio by, I suppose, these crazy times we're living in today, and that's always appreciated too. So thank you much for that. Vash, you see, those are the type of questions you guys can all read. That those are the type of questions I can't ask. I mean, I suppose I could. I don't see the point in it though. Vash wants to know what's worse, Biden or our alien overlords?
Ay. Take your pick.
Alien overlords aren't costing me a ton at the gas pump.
Yeah, I'll leave that up for you to decide. I know what I think.
Do you think, and Chuck has an interesting question here, and I'm going to run this by you, but I'm going to word it a little bit differently. And I ask you to be careful with your response. I think we're already pushing the line here as far as whether or not it stays on YouTube or not, considering what's going on in Ukraine. Apparently you can't talk about what's really going on over there, or they'll take you down.
Yeah.
So, and that's sad, right? That,
of course it's sad. It's where do we begin? How wrong that is.
Do you think that the Biden administration is purposely trying to kill the U.S. dollar?
I think maybe their masters are pushing that, whoever their policy masters are, might be trying to do that. I think more so they're trying to force their view of what our technological future should be rather than pull the dollar. They're trying to force on us certain things within the myth of the climate crisis. Oh, there I said it, the myth of climate crisis.
Yeah, Michael says, I don't believe full disclosure will occur. They're too worried about the God reaction, primitives worshiping superior tech. And, Michael has a good point, and I think that's why we haven't had that yet.
Well,
I mean, that's probably it. But if they have to disclose themselves to save the planet, wouldn't they?
If that's what they're really about, to save the planet, they would. But why? I again, we don't know what's going on in the minds of these ETs, and if they cross the vastness of space and get here, say that they got to do it that way. They're not. I don't see them. Why would they care about what a certain demographic on our planet? How they would react religiously. I mean, I know that's been something that's been brought up. I know that the Brookings report, I believe, said, "Oh, it'll upset religions." But how old is the Brookings report now? Society and the cultures of the world have changed. I don't think it would be that big of a deal if it ever was. And as far as it preventing disclosure, maybe from the perspective of people here that are sensitive to those issues, but to the ETs themselves, I don't see them caring what. In fact, some of them, if you look at the ancient history I was talking about before, they would love that because they could take advantage of that. Oh, yeah, go ahead and worship us. So why would that stop?
Totally think so too, but I think the first thing they'd have to do is knock the population down a little bit, right? I mean, go to what the Georgia Guidestones say, right? Keep it 1 billion or less, and then disclosure will happen for those people that are left.
Yeah, that stuff on the Georgia Guidestones. Wow, that's globalist. That's wow. Yeah, that's dangerous globalist radical. Ideas. They would advocate the deaths of billions of people for their model. That whole thing bothers me, disturbed me, whoever put that up.
I honestly don't. I think that, I mean, honestly, I think that's what they think is best for them. I really do. I think
yeah, best for them.
Something that they would like. The Happy Plague Doctor, $10 super chat, says, "Love you, Mike. Love you too, Happy." Happy's also been a member of Conflict in the members section now for, I guess, a day or two. Thanks so much for joining the members area, Happy. And remember, guys, the link for the members area is down in the description. You get a whole bunch more episodes, and I'm actually going to start all of the episodes. The older ones are going to all go to the members area too. So that's just the way it's going to be, I suppose. And thanks so much, Happy. If anybody has any questions, keep it coming. And I see Sriracha 1331's back in the house. Glitch, not going to ask that question. KJE says, on the contrary, we are having disclosure as we speak.
How so?
Could there be some kind of disclosure going on right now? I mean, unless something's breaking on the news right now, then I'm not seeing. I mean, I guess that's possible, right?
Yeah, I don't think we're having this.
Okay, UFO on the news.
If he's referring to if the reference, if he or she, whoever referred to that, is so many times when I hear that, they go, yeah, the discussion from the New York Times articles is disclosure. I want to pull my eyes out of my skull when I hear that, because no, that's not disclosure. None of this stuff relative to anything since the 2017 New York Times article, the Tic Tac, and all of that, none of that is disclosure. That's what I was talking about earlier, is some luminaries, because they're not really getting disclosure, what they're doing is they're just spinning stuff and saying, oh yeah, that's disclosure. Yeah. No, it's not. It's disclosure is disclosure.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really do. Robbie B wants to know, do you think the ETs may want to manipulate our so-called leaders?
It depends on their objective. If they're here to manipulate or influence for whatever their reasons are, sure. Yeah, that's what you would do. If they're here because they're just purely explorers and they're coming from that perspective, those are the ones that are going to say, hey, we're here. oh, look how many of you it freaked out. Oh, well, deal with it. There's a whole bunch of us out here, and now we're here. But if it's a civilization that puts an emphasis on the value of or a certain path of diplomacy as part of how they do things, yeah, absolutely, I could see them wanting to influence our leaders to their own benefit, particularly more so if they're not our friends. Okay, if they're our friends, I would see them wanting to be a little more forthcoming and honest about their intentions. But if their intentions are not good, um, I see the desire to influence our leaders being stronger. That's just my perspective. I could be wrong.
All right. Glitch in the Matrix wants to know, what do you think of Mike Barra?
Mike does some interesting stuff. I like the discussions that he, is part of, through his books and things. I don't agree with all of his conclusions. I'm not interested in or follow. A lot of people have been politically vocal over the last couple of years. That part I just try to ignore. But Mike's okay. I don't know him personally. I've met him, and like I said, some of his stuff is. I found the most interesting thing he was involved with was the book he did with Richard Hoagland. Think what you want about either one of those guys. That's a very interesting book, and so that's the one I look to when I think of Mike Barra.
All right. Let's see here. I've got another question up already. It says, Vash, he's not sure if this has been discussed. Have we talked about Greer? What do you think of Greer?
Not much and not very highly. I think
he has an interesting theory.
What's that?
He has an interesting theory.
We all have interesting theories. I think Greer is full of crap, and I don't buy his. I think his intention is to make money and get attention, and I just don't buy his shtick. I don't see him as legitimate. In fact, some of the ways he goes about business, I think, are questionable. And, that's where I'm at with Greer. He's doing nothing to advance real disclosure. And he's one of the knuckleheads that I think is adversely affecting ufology and has over the last several years. So there you go. That's what I think of Greer. I have no use for him.
Yeah, and I'm going to get you right off of there, and I'm going to ask you, why do you think somebody hasn't just showed up to these Georgia Guidestones and just bulldozed them over? I mean, they have like high security around those things. I mean,
I don't know.
If I lived in that neighborhood, I might be tempted to go down there with a bulldozer and just be like, "Here, you guys."
Well, it might be on private property. I'm not sure exactly about it. I haven't been to them. I don't like the vibe I get off of what the motive is, because I am not a globalist. Okay. I am not a collectivist. I respect and value highly human individuality. And, anything that to me looks and sounds and walks and smells like what that does is a problem from my perspective. It's a globalist, really elitist kind of thing. So therefore, I don't know if someone could answer if it's on private property or not. If it's on private property, that would explain, why nobody just rumbles up there with a bulldozer and knocks it over.
It'd be easier to do it if it was on private property than federal property.
It'd be what?
Less trouble.
Oh, right. Well, you're right. If it's on federal property, it could be guarded too. But if it's on private property,
Yeah, but I mean, you get in more trouble.
Yeah, so.
All right. Bernard Evans says, thoughts on the Holloman Air Force encounter, R.E. Eisenhower meeting E.T.
I'm not sure about the Wait a minute. Did Eisenhower allegedly meet ET at Holloman, or wasn't that in Palm Springs? I
Yeah,
was,
I
I
thought it
was,
was. I thought it was.
yeah. I think because the Holloman encounter, I'll admit that has intrigued me for years. Now, I think we know that some folks in ufology, that was dangled, a film and stuff was dangled to them, and I think they were having, they were being yanked around. But when you look at the specifics of the story of the Holloman encounter, it's very intriguing to me. So I think Holloman could have happened. It's my understanding that Eisenhower meeting ET in Palm Springs is a fairy tale, that it likely is not something that happened. But the Holloman thing, there might be something to that.
All right.
That's just my opinion. I don't know for sure.
All right. Not quite human. I'm going to avoid that one, man. Sorry. Vash wants to know alien implants. What's the guest take on it?
Gosh, I will say this. I was acquainted, the guy who taught me a remote viewing protocol. He ended up on UFO Hunters. He was one of the people that had an alleged implant, and he had it in his leg. Now, I was there for part of that episode being filmed, and met Bill Burns and the guys who are on the show and stuff. And in that discussion, Roger Lear, and in that discussion, the guy who is the techie, who's supposed to be there to be the skeptic, he put some type of frequency meter on it, and it was allegedly, I can't remember, it was receiving or transmitting or something, a signal on a frequency that was known to be a NASA frequency. And I found that part to be intriguing. An extraterrestrial implant, I doubt that. Maybe an implant by someone in our own intel community or something, whatever. I guess that's possible, but I generally doubt a lot of the alleged ET abduction claims, and some of the stuff that gets drawn into the lore of that. So implants, I think it's very likely, very possible that somebody, a very earthly explanation, somebody is going around putting this stuff in people. I don't lean towards it being ET.
All right. Sirach 1331 wants to know, do you think disclosure has already occurred, as in soft disclosure through media and movies, etc.?
No. However, I'll put a caveat on that, since you mentioned media and movies. I do find the discussion intriguing that somebody has in the know on this has allowed information to be put into films and such, TV shows. I find that to be a really interesting discussion, because we could see that happening. Look at Close Encounters. If I'm not mistaken, it turned out that the exact budget of that movie, in the end, when it was done, was the same amount of money that President Carter had committed to a UFO study project of some sort. And I personally was acquainted with a guy who worked for a company called DreamQuest, and the guys who founded that worked on Close Encounters. They were hired by Doug Trumbull, and they worked on Close Encounters. And anyway, source, person who knew a person who knew a person, claims that the accountant for Close Encounters, I was told this in 1980, 81, that the accountant for Close Encounters told him that government money went into the production of that film. Now, I had heard that in 80 or 81, and then just in the last couple of years, I learned about the budget matching the amount that Carter apparently committed U.S. government funds. So the implication is did the money Carter set aside, did that go into producing Close Encounters of the Third Kind? And why? Is it because there's something true in there? That's what it suggests. But here's the problem. The so-called evidence we have for that is all hearsay and circumstantial that's not strong enough. So that's an interesting anecdote for the just soft disclosure through media and movies argument side of the house. So
yeah, I tend to think that UFO films make a lot of money, and that's
that too, sure. So but I could see where it could be easy. You have the government contact, go to the producers and say, hey, do it however you want to, but here's some info we want you to include, and go forth and make your movie. So could it happen? Absolutely, it could have happened. I mean, there's been whole books written on it, right?
Yeah,
Bruce Ruck wrote one
all the time. That's called Project Mockingbird. I recommend people. And they run our entertainment industry just as they run everything else. I think the CIA is really scary, and I think that's one of our main problems all over the earth is the CIA. Sapphire Elf says, if disclosure came from an inside job like an Edward Snowden type leak and data dump, is there a name of a person in the UFO community that you can point to who might know enough to blow the lid off it?
In the UFO community? No. And here's the thing, the absurdity of I do not see anyone in the know when it comes time, if they decide they're going to disclose it. I don't see them, I hate to say it, I don't see them coming to anybody in the UFO community to make that happen. I see them going to, a much, bigger source outside of our little community. It's something that'll be taken more seriously by the public, because quite frankly, because of liars, fakers, con men, and the nonsense that happens to populate our community alongside anyone who's legitimate. Because of that, the greater public doesn't take our community seriously. So if you think something that important is going to be released to the world through anybody in our community, legitimate or knucklehead, I think that's a mistake, because it just doesn't make sense that they would do it that way. And even though we have some smart, legitimate researchers and folks in the community, sorry, it's just within the bigger picture of things, we're just not it. This community is not it. That I don't see them doing any kind of disclosure through us.
I agree with you, and I'm talking about the ones that are too popular to come on Conflict Radio, and all these people, they made a name off being on a Bell show 20 years ago, and they just, I don't know.
If an Edward Snowden type was going to do a leak and data dump, that would be something that he would give to all the outlets of what we call the mainstream media, or would just put it out there on the internet, just kind of boom, would just blast the evidence to the world. I do not see them coming to our community. What that is there's knuckleheads in our community whose egos and desire for dollars and attention, they're the ones that are putting this idea into people's heads, because they're the ones who want to be that person, or they want to convince the audience in this community that they are that person, or they have that person. And time again, even when this has been claimed, it turns out to be nonsense. And the reason I say the things I say is that this community, it's time that people acted like grown-ups again, instead of children who've seen E.T. and Close Encounters one too many times. We need to be adults and be honest with ourselves. There's a bunch of nonsense in this community, And the argument that, well, you don't know for sure, it could be, that doesn't fly anymore. That's, I totally think ETs exist and have come here, and I have no problem with the idea that they do come here. But some of the popular notions that people just assume have been proven, or just they decide for themselves that's the reality. Some of this stuff is just ridiculous and based on nonsense, and really just they want to believe. So
Yeah, that's true. All right, so I ended our questions. Do you have some time to stick around and we can get to the ones of people that still have questions, or you got to go?
sure, yeah.
All right, so we're going into bonus time, guys. So thanks very much, Walter, for sticking around.
Sure.
Robbie B has an interesting question here. He says, "Do you think some rogue state might just spill the beans, and how do you think the corporate media would play it?"
Well,
I mean, if it was Russia right now that said, "Oh, and UFOs exist," they'd be like, "Yeah, lying."
yeah, there's a few years back, I remember there was this something going on, and Putin was supposed to make some big public announcement. And the way they were setting up, there was like this area where he was going to make the announcement, and it looked like an area where they can have, like a little audience maybe of, power. And I remember speculating with Joseph Farrell and a couple others, is Putin going to do just what you described, and think about that. What if some government out there, a leader, said, enough with your crap. We're going to just go ahead and tell the people of the world what's what with this stuff and what we know. That's intriguing. I would not be opposed to that. And any group, even if it's our own government, that it would piss off, well, sorry,
Yeah, there's a real fascinating story coming out of Ukraine, and I don't know if anybody here has heard it or is in the loop on this story, that Russia went in because there's this space ark that's buried in the desert of Ukraine, and it got activated somehow. So the Russians have gone in there and they've taken over this ark, this space ark, and have taken it out of the hands of us. And they're all over it, studying it, and
right.
that's a fascinating story, right? Is it?
You gotta love this community, the crap that people come up with.
It's to think about, though, like wow, that would be cool. Like if
What's more like? Oh, it would be cool. There's a lot of things that would be cool, but
they're saying too that there's a desert there, and there's no reason for a desert to be there. It's like a 20 square mile or a 20 miles circumference circle that's desert where nothing grows.
yeah,
And
it's
the
wow.
radiation. That's where
And then the people spreading this say, "Well, disprove it," and then they think that proves it. No, it's here's the thing that's more likely, that they don't want us to know, and that's come out in the last 48 hours. Oh, gee, it turns out that the United States really was.
Don't go there.
Wow.
Please. I know, but they will nail me.
Okay, so
I know.
The Lilliputians were involved with something in the land of hoo-ha that doesn't make the Lilliputians look very good at all. Something really nasty and nefarious. And the Dinky Knockers have invaded the land of hoo-ha, and they're going to likely find these,
and they're exposing it. Yep.
Yeah, and exposing it, and that's going to make the Lilliputians look like the a-holes they likely are in this situation. And I think that is more likely what's going on.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're 100% right. And it's that's scary.
Oh yeah.
All right.
And hey, let me I'm going to step away for just like 30 seconds. I'll be right back.
All right. So I hated to cut him off like that, but that's definitely something that they're not allowing. I know that's for sure. And you guys in the chat know probably what I'm talking about. China has actually called for UN weapons inspectors to go and look at what we've been doing there it's interesting, but I didn't want him to say that word. So we have to do what we have to do sometimes, and unfortunately, that's where we are. Did you guys hear that the Google took down their reverse image search? I find that fascinating. Why would they do that? There is a back door to get to it, but you have to, I guess, DuckDuckGo it and try to find it. But even DuckDuckGo came out today and said that they're going to start censoring their search results. So I don't know. I mean, maybe put it in the comments and I'll go ahead and say it. Where do we go besides, like, what's a good search engine to use anymore? You know, does anybody have any idea if we can't duck it, right? I always say duck it. Don't Google it, just duck it. I think that's funny. All right, so let's see. Someone spray painted the Georgia guy stones a few months ago. I hope he comes back. I didn't upset him with that. We sit here talking forever waiting for him. So anyway, I guess let me go ahead and let you know that we are always online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. You can find us on Spotify, Spreaker, and all of your podcast catchers. And it sounds like Walter's back. So I don't have to do that spiel at the end. So I just did it. So Vash wants to know, does the guest have any info on the Black Knight satellite?
No, but who does? I mean, the only info I have that I'd share is I didn't word that the right way, that I would share, implying that I have something I wouldn't. Look, when you look at the explanation that it's a piece of space debris that, off of a satellite or something like that NASA lost up there, it's pretty convincing. And this has been put out there. This has been explained in detail, even with images. The thing you're looking at that you're told is the Black Knight, popularly, is identical to this cover shroud that was on part of a satellite. Okay. Now, it turns out that data is conflated, as they say, with the story of the Black Knight. In other words, you had the story of the Black Knight satellite there before you had this mysterious image, right? The image has been explained away. That is not some mysterious object. It was a shroud from a piece of NASA equipment. Set that aside. Cut that out of the Black Knight satellite story, and what you're left with, I've not done a deep dive on this, but what you're left with is another one of those apocryphal tales that was inspired by something that Nikola Tesla indeed wrote and said in the early 20th century, that he was picking up signals, intelligent signals from space. Now, some people argue that, he was picking up like something that was actually natural, quasars, pulsars, whatever, or just space noise. But Nikola Tesla was not an idiot, and I think it's possible that he might very well have been picking up an intelligent signal. And my understanding, when I've looked at the Black Knight thing, is that's where that story kind of comes from. That's where that story was born from, the idea of this Black Knight satellite, and it has an orbit that's different than things we put up there and such. So again, I see that as one of those things where I think there's a nugget in there, a nugget of some kind of truth. I'm not ready to write off what Nikola Tesla said and wrote as just him misunderstanding something in nature. Not that that's not possible. He could have been completely wrong, but I think that's where the nugget of possibility is in that.
All right. Sriracha says, wasn't Duck Duck Go a game you played in kindergarten? No, it was Duck Duck Goose. And when I was in kindergarten, it was my favorite game. I loved it. I was really good at it. All right. I guess 2 questions left. Philip Blair wants to know, do UFO sightings tend to occur where telluric current lines intersect, and why?
Hey, Philip. My understanding, I recall this back in the 80s, I saw, and I wish I could remember their names. I apologize for this, but it was a couple of guys, a couple of researchers, and they were the first ones I ever saw to associate UFO sightings with what we would call telluric currents, more specifically at the intersections of these telluric energy lines, the world grid, so to speak. So why would that be? Well, the telluric current is a real thing. Okay, it's an actual real thing, and it is a low frequency energy that courses through the planet. It was part of the geomorphology of the planet when the planet was forming, and then when the planet solidified. Plate tectonics notwithstanding, but you know what I mean. When the material solidified, the current continues to flow through the terrain through this what Tesla referred to as the world grid. So the UFOs, so to speak, if they're being seen at these intersections, it suggests to me, and along these lines, it suggests to me that they're somehow using the energy or the gravity forces that flow with this energy. Gravity wells. A guy named Seshari in his book Handprint of Atlas has associated the intersections of these lines with gravity wells and stuff. And if somehow this is involved in the propulsion or energy of certain UFOs, that would explain, in my opinion, and the opinion of others before me, that would explain why UFO sightings and such occur in conjunction with these lines for the most part. So that's what I would think. That's what it suggests to me, that somehow this energy is important in the function of whatever these UFOs are.
All right. Awesome. Walter, man, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really do.
Sure.
I wanted to get you, just so everybody knows, I wanted to get you on a week ago, but I decided to take the night off because, got to do that sometimes, right?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. You got to give yourself a break.
It's all in good fun. So definitely appreciate everybody hanging out. Walter, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, I, of course, have the Walter Bosley channel at YouTube. And you can go there and check out my live stream every Sunday afternoon at 2:30, or somewhere around 2:30 or after on Pacific time on Sunday afternoons. But I'm also loading up pre-recorded content there. Also, my books can be found only at lulu.com, print on demand. I've been a publisher for 20 years now. I'm not a vanity press. I use Lulu for as a printing press and a distribution service, and I don't sell on Amazon because they're not good for small press publishers. I'm a small press guy. So go to lulu.com, put my name in, or if you happen to know the title of one of my books, put that in there and it'll take you right to it. And it's worth the wait, print on demand, because it's good quality. So
yeah, and just so everybody knows, the links are down in the description box below. You can go down there and click on them, and at least go over and subscribe to Walter's YouTube channel and show him that Conflict Radio comes with force.
Yay.
Show him some numbers over there, guys, and there we go. Conflict Radio rocks, and the Matrix says. All right, Walter, hang on a second. Guys, I already did my spiel. We're going to be back on Monday. We're going to do a show Monday, and I'm not going to tell you who the guest is. You just have to wait and see, just like always. I usually, sometimes I'm going to try to start getting the link ready the night before, and instead of 3 hours or 4 hours before the show, just to give you guys more time and let you know who the guest is and all that good stuff. So definitely check that out. Let's see. Somebody says here, I saw something here that I thought somebody was asking something, but I guess I didn't do it right. So, okay. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us, man. Batten down the hatches and be safe.
Aircraft.
Wait, I got it. I remember. You still there, Walter?
Yes.
I remember. I forgot to ask you if you knew who Corn Pop was.
You know what? No. In all of that and all the times I've seen that joked about and shown, specifically, no. I just know he was the guy who
He's a bad dude.
Yeah, he's a bad dude, right? Corn Pop. Oh, they elected him.
I'm glad I remember that. Sometimes I forget, and it's like the show ends, and I'm like, oh, but I remember it, and I was just like, oh, I'm coming back. So, all right, guys, batten down the hatches and be safe.